Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're dropping right into a fast-paced, incredibly intense analysis of an unsinkable geopolitical nightmare. We're going to explore a scenario that honestly seems completely impossible, tracing the ripple effects of a sudden, overnight collapse of the modern European order. We'll be using the data, the historical context, and the structure of our interconnected world to map out exactly how an event of this magnitude would unfold, hour by hour and sector by sector. Picture this. You go to sleep tonight thinking tomorrow is just going to be, a totally ordinary day, only to wake up to the kind of headline that literally stops time for a second. What if the first breaking news alert on your phone says, Germany has invaded Poland? At first, you'd probably think it's fake, right? A misunderstanding, a hacked news ticker, or just some terrible mistake. I mean, in the modern era, surrounded by treaties, alliances, and all these promises of peace, a sentence like that feels entirely impossible. Until suddenly, it's not. So let's start with phase one, the unthinkable first night. Okay, let's dive into this. Modern Europe is built entirely on the assumption that wars like this belong in history books. We've grown up in a world where these two nations are deeply, deeply connected through diplomacy, travel, the European Union, and massive trade. To put it in perspective, they share over 100 billion euros in bilateral trade every single year. This entire structure of cooperation was specifically designed to make old-style conflict absolutely unthinkable. But contrast that assumption with the terrifying reality of sudden conflict. When those first reports actually hit, the illusion of safety shatters instantly. That quiet, comfortable assumption of peace is replaced in a heartbeat by blaring sirens, hacked tickers, and emergency broadcasts, just completely hijacking your TV screen. In those first few hours, the silence breaks into absolute chaos. The images start pouring in. Confirmations hit, rumors become facts, and those facts instantly turn into raw fear. Social media would just absolutely explode, with videos, maps, actually, scratch that, mostly unverified warnings and rampant speculation. Families are frantically calling each other. Journalists are scrambling for any official statement they can get. And in one singular moment, governments across the entire continent shift from their routine day-to-day administration into high-gear emergency mode. The old nightmare nobody ever wanted to imagine has returned, and suddenly, uncertainty becomes the most dangerous element in the room. Which brings us to phase two, chaos on the ground. It is honestly terrifying how fast normal life just completely collapses. At hour one, there's really just disbelief in the dark, but by hour three, major cities like Warsaw, Krakow, and Gdansk are wide awake, and people are frantically trying to figure out whether to hide or run. Fast forward to hour 12, and primal fear has completely taken over. We're talking highways clogged with emergency traffic, gas stations totally sucked dry, and grocery stores cleared out as everyone scrambles for water, batteries, medicine, really anything that gives them even an illusion of control. And by hour 24, borders are slamming shut and hospitals are already overwhelmed, bracing for the absolute worst. This brings us to a really stark, heavy reality. War isn't just about military strategy and moving flags on a map. War is total confusion at 2 a.m. It's an unanswered phone call that makes your stomach drop. It's sitting in a crowded shelter. It's the brutal, immediate instinct to survive and the sudden, total loss of your normal life. The contrast between our modern, comfortable convenience and this primal reality is just devastating. Because when you get down to it, the true impact of the onset of war is defined by these hyper-specific, micro-level stories. It's a parent desperately trying to calm a crying child in the pitch dark, a student hiding in a basement just endlessly refreshing their newsfeed, a truck driver who is suddenly stranded on a road that, just hours ago, was a regular commute and is now a border of fear, or a grandmother gripping a suitcase she packed in a total panic. These human vignettes show us that aid always arrives only after the fear has already spread. The immediate need isn't supplies, it's simply time. Time to move, time to hide, and time to survive that very first wave. Now, zooming out to phase three, the geopolitical collapse. Now, how do the powers that be react to this? It is a massive, immediate test of the entire global security structure, forcing allies to scramble under intense pressure. Poland instantly demands urgent international support, carrying the incredibly heavy emotional weight of history. Germany faces unprecedented global condemnation, signaling a complete collapse of its reputation as Europe's center for peace and stability. Meanwhile, the EU and NATO, they're plunged into a severe existential crisis. They're meeting under immense pressure because a direct attack inside Europe tests the very foundation of why they even exist. And of course, major powers like the US, UK, and France are immediately demanding de-escalation. But as we know all too well, the first hours of a war move way, way faster than diplomatic channels can handle. Because while all those frantic messages are being sent, the situation on the ground is already caught in an escalation spiral. Modern conflict is incredibly messy, and it rarely stays in one lane. First, you see airspace getting heavily restricted. Then, borders tighten up. And crucially, at step 3, cyber attacks start emerging right alongside physical strikes, putting massive stress on communication grids. Finally, civil defense systems are activated. The scariest part of this whole spiral is the sheer possibility of the conflict widening before anybody can even pump the brakes. There's this incredibly chilling quote from our source material that I want to share. Once a crisis starts, every reaction can become the next trigger. That is how small beginnings become large disasters. The dangerous potential for escalation is quite literally everywhere. The uncertainty of the motives, did this start as a border incident, a political collapse, or some sort of cyber sabotage, forces every single nation to prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario. And the tragic irony is, those very preparations can often trigger further disasters. Next up, Phase 4, the economic shockwave. Look, markets absolutely hate uncertainty. And this scenario, this is uncertainty at its absolute peak. The impact cascades so fast. European stocks would immediately plummet. Energy markets would react violently. The domino effect is just instantaneous. Transport and logistics routes are disrupted, which immediately chokes off global supply chains. That in turn hits manufacturing. Agriculture takes a massive hit as the movement of labor grinds to a halt. All of a sudden, the price of doing business in Europe is tied directly to the cost of a war literally nobody wanted, and insurance costs across the board absolutely skyrocket. So you might be wondering, how many hours does this massive economic shock remain localized to just Germany and Poland? 0. Literally 0 hours. Because our modern global economies are so deeply, intricately interconnected, the shock simply cannot stay local. Companies, massive banks, and governments all over the world begin adjusting their risk profiles, moving their capital, and overhauling policies before day 1 is even over. Finally, we reach Phase 5, the long shadow. This introduces a truly devastating concept: identity collapse. Europe has spent generations trying to prove that its old, bloody wars are firmly in the past, not its future. They built these massive institutions, legal frameworks, and political habits to ensure that a military conflict between major European states was completely unthinkable. An event like this wouldn't just break those habits, it would humiliate them. It would shatter the long-held, comforting assumption that the continent had permanently moved beyond this kind of nightmare, proving that, sadly, history still holds massive, terrifying power. And for the folks actually living through it, the dramatic, adrenaline-fueled initial shock eventually settles into this exhausting, long-term adaptation that we can call the routine of fear. People learn to sleep in short bursts. They meticulously conserve fuel and hoard food. Kids deal with irregular schooling, and adults trying to navigate completely unstable work environments. That constant, grinding background noise of uncertainty just becomes a way of life. Sure, communities learn resilience, but they learn it at a terrible, terrible price, having to adapt to a world where their future plans can literally vanish overnight. This whole hypothetical situation forces the rest of the world to sit back, watch, and ask some really profound questions. If two deeply connected modern European nations can suddenly become enemies overnight, which of our assumptions are actually still safe? Can alliances really be trusted? Can treaties actually prevent war? What starts as a localized crisis rapidly transforms into a glaring global warning. It spreads through every capital city and newsroom on Earth, forcing everyone to wonder if the institutions we built after history's worst wars can really stop new ones from breaking out. Which leaves us with one final lingering thought for today. Is peace guaranteed by modernity alone? Well, the answer this scenario loudly suggests is no. Peace isn't just some automatic byproduct of having good trade deals and cool technology. It's an active, daily choice that leaders, institutions, and everyday societies have to keep making, even when fear and pride make it incredibly difficult. If exploring this scenario made you realize just how fragile our peace truly is, think about what steps we all must take to maintain it. Keep discussing it, keep questioning, and never, ever take the quiet of an ordinary tomorrow for granted. Thanks for exploring this explainer with us.